Battered but proud people of the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hey guys, welcome to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and normally I'm in the WYSL studio, but today we are actually in a coffee shop in Utica. And I have a co-host with me, Katie.
Hey, guys.
And this is actually your coffee shop.
Yes, thank you for coming down. Character Coffee.
Thank you so much for hosting. So I want to tell you guys a little bit about what's going on in today's show and then introduce a few other guests. You're probably wondering what I'm doing in Utica. Unless you listened to last show, then you already know what I'm doing in Utica. But I'm here because the Libertarian Party in Utica actually has a full slate of candidates. And I'm here to introduce them, talk with them about what local government means to them, and really just give them an opportunity to kind of talk about what they're hoping to make better in government. So I'm going to run down first the list of candidates who were basically announced today. And then after that, I'm going to read something from one of the candidates who couldn't be here. So first candidate is actually Katie Martin.
Hey guys. Yes, running for first ward.
Yep, so Katie's running for first ward, and I have to my left, although maybe on the live stream, maybe on my right, depending on if the video is inverted or not, I've got Tim Julian, and he's running for County Ledge 19th District.
19th District, the South Utica area,
Yep,
yes.
and he's also the former mayor of Utica, so he's probably got a lot to tell us about, I'm sure. We have some other candidates as well. Another candidate who's going to be on the second half of the show is Michael Hennessy, and he's running for county exec. And we've got some local ties to Rochester. His wife is from Rochester, so when we bring him on the show, we'll talk about that. Another candidate who won't be able to make it with us today, he's actually out volunteering with some of the seniors from the local school, is Mike Gentile. He's running for at-large. And then Michael Galimi is running for Utica Common Council president. He couldn't be with us. He was actually here earlier, and he left me with something to read for you guys. I think it's actually a really good intro to the show. So I'm just going to read this off for you. He says, obtaining the endorsement of the Libertarian Party is a landmark achievement for me as a government official running for re-election. The party is backed by principles of personal responsibility and the fact that government should not restrict the ability to express those responsibilities. I firmly believe those principles carry over. Carry over something I can't read. I'm sorry, Mike. So sorry. State and federal government interact with local municipalities. So I think that's actually a great introduction to the beginning of this show. The idea that, people should have the ability to have personal responsibility. A lot of times government tries to step in the way of personal responsibility, whether that's through regulatory bodies, regulations, laws, any of that sort of thing. So let's talk about that in Utica.
I concur, I would say, with the libertarian line. I think it's so fitting, especially for the political culture in Utica. And I think it's so much kind of a special interest group more than it is the voice of the people. And Tim, you've seen it probably more than anybody over the years.
Yes.
And
yes,
8 years as mayor in
yes,
Utica,
yes.
right? And what years was that for?
That was 2000 to 2000 and end of 2007. Actually.
Oh, sure.
So it was interesting times, certainly interesting times, because we went through, started out, the state was pretty well financially set. And then, of course, September 11th, 2001 hits.
Right.
And money dried up, and certainly a lot of things changed, a lot of priorities changed. And again, you probably lost some of those freedoms that we took for granted at the time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Very good. So, being a small business owner and being very familiar with regulation, Utica, what are some of the things that you guys think local government, and for listeners to the show, I always talk about local government as being government closest to the people. These are the actual people that you can reach out to, the people that you could literally touch, if you needed to. When you have an issue in your community, whether it's just your neighborhood, maybe it's your small business, maybe it's you're trying to get some zoning approved on property that you own. What are some of those issues that are going on here in Utica, and what
And
were your thoughts?
I can go off on a whole list of reasons, but I always give my first example of like the first time I got tipped off of, is the city leadership in our favor? Are they against? And it's so stupid, but it takes me back to a story about flower pots that were put up all down Genesee Street. And they're beautiful, and it's a great idea, and why not bring more beautiful, pretty color flowers in? But for our business, it turned into one giant ashtray out front, right by the door, and that's where everybody would smoke, and it just wasn't a good fit. And I get that it was supposed to be a good idea, but it wasn't. And I remember just going through asking everybody, I'm like, who's our council person? I went up and down the street, and nobody could tell me because I wanted to help to try and get this moved or find a better solution. And the fact that nobody could tell me was my first issue with that. Sure. Because I've asked people that have been on this street for 90 years, and that was just kind of set it up for what to expect moving forward, and that's not the way it should be. So, yeah.
So bringing government more accessible to
Right,
people,
that's-
actually being involved in the community.
And right now,
talking
there's
with
not
people.
an actual, that's what I hope to do being in council, is set up actual communication so people will know. And how many times I've knocked on doors to get signatures or out canvassing, and people tell me they don't know what the common council is.
Yeah.
And that's not the way it should be. We are their actual voice. If you don't know what they want or think, like, you have no business being in office for that.
Yeah, that's actually a good thing to bring up. Utica has common council, being from Rochester,
Sure.
Western New York. Is that the same thing as like a city council, or is there a city council? Is it the same
Yeah,
thing? It's the same thing.
it is the
Okay.
city council
Awesome.
to that
Very
regard.
cool.
Yeah, I would say.
Anything you jump in on?
No, she's absolutely right. Unfortunately, there's so many people who don't know who their government representative is, and that's scary because you're actually paying these people. You're paying these people for the privilege of representing you. And what happens is, the further away they get from you, the person they're there to represent, the more removed they get from the troubles that you face and the trials that you face. And as you say, Andrew, local government is just that. It's local government. It's the things that really matter to people. As we look out on the national scene and even the state scene to some effect, there's so many things that get looked at and talked about that will never have any effect on us here or ourselves in our personal lives. Yet,
Right.
on a local level, whether you're a council person, whether you're a mayor, whether you're a county legislator, a county executive, and I think it kind of stops about there. You may be dealing with a pothole in front of someone's house. You may be dealing with a cat stuck in a tree. You may be dealing with the school bus goes by an area too fast. At the same time, you're also dealing with trying to figure out how to plug a hole in a $70 million budget or a $400 million budget. And I think that's the duality that you face when you are involved in a local government, is that you are looking at all these different ways that things have to be done, while at the same time trying to maintain some level of discourse with the community and the ability to talk to people back and forth. And they do lose that. My impetus behind running for county legislator is I always said, no one can tell you who their county legislator is. Many people do know who their council person is. May not have the best of luck finding them, but they do at least know who they are. County legislators, people don't know. And one thing I said from the very beginning is, as a county legislator, you're going to know who I am. You're going to know what district I represent. You're going to know that I also help to represent the county itself, because that's one of the things that I've always talked about. I was on a radio show one time, and I said, I defy anybody to tell me who their county legislator is. And a guy called in, he goes, just so you know, my county legislator is this person. I said, well, thank you. Thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. But thanks also for proving my point, because that person lost 6 years ago, and
my
this other
goodness.
guy's been county legislator since that time.
Yeah,
So
it's so true.
It sounded like a setup. It wasn't, and I couldn't have asked for anything better than that.
Right.
But it's there needs to be some accountability amongst government officials.
And I get
think we're
frustrated.
really lacking.
Like, is
that
this
right
by
now.
design? Is it by? I try not to get a tinfoil hat about it or like go out, but it's got to change, by all means.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll say this, when I was mayor, one of the things we did was we were able to put things like the city budget online, which was never online before. I was able to actually have televised council meetings that were shot by a basically a disinterested third party. So it was the beginning of the meeting to the end of the meeting and televised on the local
That's
governmental
huge.
channel. And I'd like to see that on the county level as well. I'd like to see these meetings being canceled because I want to see, I want people to see just how little interaction there is amongst county
Well,
leaders.
that's-
And there needs to be some more discourse out there when you're out there spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. People want to know where their money's going and should it even be taken in to go to these places.
So if I were to take a takeaway from that,
Mm-hmm.
that sounds like one of your big pushes is going to be transparency.
Transparency
You
is
know,
huge.
so people can
Transparency is huge.
actually see what's going on in the county ledge meetings, and also accessibility.
Right.
So
One of the things I always tried to do as mayor, and I would force this into my seat as county legislator, is being there and showing up to meetings that you don't really have to show up to, but I like to show up to them anyway, because at the end of the day, they want to hear it from you. Whether it's
Right.
good news or bad news, they want to hear it from somebody who's accountable to them. And I think that's the only thing we can be, and the only thing we can really, the thing you can offer up doesn't cost you a nickel as a elected official, is that
And that
accountability.
helps you have that trust and respect for your leadership to say they're in this with you.
Well,
They're
you know,
not.
they always appreciated it. They always
Yeah.
looked at it, said, you know what, that wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was an answer.
Came from you.
And,
Yes,
and that's all you can really give them, is you can give them an answer and give them an honest answer at that.
absolutely.
yeah, absolutely. So that's great. I mean, one thing for me, I always love hearing transparency in government, because I think that is one of the biggest issues, and also getting people involved in government too.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I hear people say something along the lines of, "Oh, you know, I'm upset about this thing," or "I'm upset about that thing," and but those people don't show up to vote. And they don't know
Right.
who their elected officials are, and they don't know, like for me, we have a speak to council once or twice a month where you get maybe like 2 minutes in front of city council
Sure.
to say your piece. Same thing with our county ledge meetings. But many times I don't see people engaging in government with their elected officials. And it sometimes feels like people are actually totally just forget about the fact that there are elected officials until maybe 6 months before election time.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Right.
then all of a sudden their center.
Or worse, I
and-
hear all the time people say, "What's the point?"
Yeah,
and
I hear
that's
that all the time.
A lot of apathy.
All the time.
Yeah.
A lot of apathy, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And really, that goes back to the transparency. That goes back to the fact that they don't feel as though they're being listened to.
Right.
And how do you get past that? Well, you try to listen to them, explain to them that, you know, I understand your feelings and thoughts on this. However, we still have to do things this way or that way because
Sure.
this is the end that we're shooting toward. This is what we're going forward with. So it's difficult to you can't please everybody. I mean, if
course.
you are doing your job and doing your job correctly, 50% of the people like you and 50% of the people hate you.
Sure.
And there's usually not a lot of gray area in between. But, you know, what you can shoot for is have more than 50% of the people at least respect you for being there and showing up.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about in local government, what Common Council might be able to help people with, what County Ledge might be able to help people with, where are the roles and responsibilities of those positions, so that people have an idea who are listening to the show, maybe thinking, yeah, you know what, maybe I should reach out to my council person. Yeah, you're right. I have no idea who my county legislator is, but now maybe they're thinking, well, what do you do
Right.
besides, you know, vote on things, and they probably don't even know what those things are.
Sure. I'd say a huge part. So with Common Council in Utica, we have, I think it's a $70 million budget, and a lot of it's fixed. We were just talking about this earlier, Tim. And so what is my role with that? Is it the 9% that we can play with and like try to save, cut spending, or we have a very small tax base. Utica's in kind of a difficult situation. And so, but with that on top of it, that I'd like to see out of our Common Council reps that I don't always see now is just lobbying for what these streets need. My first ward here is actually, if you've ever been to Utica, is downtown Utica is involved with that. And that being said, a lot of the neighborhoods who are part of First Ward get completely overlooked at the sake of downtown. And that's where all the shiny pictures come from. That's where all the money goes. And it's not balanced by any means. And that's where I think a lot of people come from when they say, what's the Common Council? What do they even do? So that would be a big piece of this that I would try to bring in is give them a voice. Right now, we don't even have minutes listed if what happens at a
Oh,
meeting.
really?
There's not even agendas posted. Sometimes our local paper will post it. And it's just mind-boggling to me that it's made it this far without that. And we don't even have a .gov website. I'm thankful we do have a website, though, thanks to Tim. Let's start there. But there's so many pieces of it that is missing. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, Tim, or...
The only thing I'll add to that is that, fortunately, Mike Galimi, who's running for council president, who you guys have
Yeah,
also
he's done
endorsed,
amazing work.
he does put out a column in the paper
Yes.
weekly before the council meetings. It says this is what's coming up on the agenda to let people kind of know
Yep.
if there's anything there of interest. Then they have the opportunity to go and stop in the council meeting and see what goes on and things, or put their input into their council persons beforehand, just to let them know. So I do have to give Mike a lot of credit on that. He started
Absolutely.
that, he instituted that, and that's something that he's kept up with and done.
And a lot of people have
done-
made comment on
done
that
a
too,
great
that's
job
where
with
they've
that.
seen it. I would just see it. It's a quick update to a website, and I would like to see a solution like that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Awesome. So county ledge.
County
what do
legislator.
people think about, or what can they expect out of the county ledge? What type of things do you vote on? You have a budget too.
Out of me at the county ledge, or just the county ledge in
County
general?
ledge in general, and you could talk to
Well,
your opinions on that
the
too.
thing,
sure.
I have that history that goes back as mayor and interaction with Oneida County to begin with. So as such, one of the things I railed against at the time in 2006, the current county executive put in place what at the time was the highest sales tax in New York State, outside of New York City, and it was 9.25% at the time. They have since peeled that back 0.5%, which is nowhere near enough. And you see that in your day-to-day dealings. Basically, I was shopping for trailers one time, and I called up a place out by Rochester actually, and they said, the guy said, "Well, where are you from? What's your sales tax?" I told him 8.75%. He goes, "Oh, you poor son of a gun." And I'm like, "Really?" I said, "This is how people look at us, and this is just the tip of the iceberg at what people look at when they come to an area like Oneida County or the city of Utica." And I think that we are unfortunately led. I'm a small business owner as well, and have been prior to my time in office as mayor, and since that time, and during my time in office as mayor, I was able to maintain that with some help from my family. And the tax burden is extremely cumbersome. Oneida County comes out, and you talk about transparency. One of the things they talked about this year is there's going to be no tax increase. There's going to be no county tax increase. Yet county taxes for Utica residents went up nearly 10%, and they've gone up nearly 10% every single year for the last 5 years or so, all the while citing the fact that there was no tax increase. And they say, well, no, this wasn't a tax increase. This was a levy we put on something else. Well, it's kind of like when Cuomo comes out and says, well, there's no tax increase, but by the way, it's going to cost you $3 more to drive down the thruway, and it's going to cost you a little more to get a
Right.
fishing license, and a little more to do this, and a little more to do that. We cut all these taxes, but no, they added fees. A fee is a tax. At the end of the day, a fee is a tax. It keeps you from doing things that you enjoy, or it makes it more cumbersome and expensive to do things that you enjoy. And that's egregious, because what they are doing is they're segmenting out those taxes against little, smaller groups, so that whole group does not have the vocal power that the entire state would have at one time. And to me, that makes it even worse, and it continues to make it even worse. The county spends well more than it should on foolishness. It's gotten money from the Oneida Indian Nation through the years that should be knocking those taxes down. It's gotten tobacco money years ago, and I look over at Mike Hennessy, and Mike's probably smiling at that one, because they've just taken these one shots and just blown them in places through new hiring and things like that, and not hiring on the street level people who are out there trying to get people and get them through social services faster when they have that need to do things like that. But whose brother-in-law or cousin needs a job
Right.
in this position? Well, yeah, we can create a deputy director. We can create a assistant to the deputy, and that's just that's hurtful to me, because these are our tax dollars that are going places that they don't need to go to. They could stay in our pockets. They could stay in the pockets of the hardworking people of this community, but they're not, because we feel as though we need to take care of this. And what part of the problem is, it comes back to many of these people are so long and so entrenched in government that they don't know any better. They don't know any different. When you've never had to reach into your pocket and make that payment for health insurance, when you've never had to reach into your pocket and make a payroll, even though you had a bad week, and you still got to pay your people because they're the people who you rely on to open the door for you or lock the door for you every single day. These are the type of things that the county executive has never faced in his life, because he's
Right.
been involved in government since he was 18 years old. And I have no qualms with that. But do not get yourself so far removed. And believe me, I was mayor for 8 years, and I see and I know how easy it is to become entrenched like that and have that feeling in your head that, geez, everything I'm doing is right. Why does it feel wrong? But looking back on it in retrospect, I see how very, very easy it is to be, even after just 8 years, to be part of that system and part of that cycle. So when you talk about someone who's been involved like that for 40 years, think about what the mindset is. The mindset is, oh, it's just this one little tax. I can show you a water bill where my county tax on a water bill is more than the actual cost of the water.
Wow.
And you look at things like that and you say to yourself, how can this possibly be? Because it's out of control and because there's nobody there to call it. County legislature holds the power in Oneida County. The county executive is to implement that power. And what's occurred over the last several years is that the county legislature is kind of aging out. And I say that in the most genteel way that I possibly can, because there's a lot of good people who are down at the county legislature, but you get tired after a while. You get tired, it gets old for you. And with that, what's happening is they are basically, it's easier for them to let someone else do it for them. And one of the things I look at is trying to get these people back involved or back to work at doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then we can start to have the opportunity to really call it out the people who need to be called out, because the tail is right now wagging the dog and we can't have that.
Yeah, there's not enough checks and balances, even in the city of Utica,
No.
when we look at the council and how the mayor was able to extend his own term limits with the help of the votes on the council for his yes people. That's a term in this city, and they
egregious.
should be
It's
in the
egregious.
best interest of the people, not of the mayor. Even if it's a mayor I love, let's see,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
should be accountability.
It should have
So-
been voted on.
Yes,
It should have been, it should have gone to
absolutely.
the people. It was
Go
voted on to
referendum
originally
on the
go to
back of the
8 years.
ballot or
Yeah,
something like that.
absolutely. If he
So-
felt that confident, and he should have let the people vote on it, and they did everything he could to circumvent that process.
And just to catch up our listeners, so the mayor, he was serving for his second term, and that was supposed to be the end of it. And maybe you can explain better, Tim, of the logistics of it all. So he,
Well, back in
Basically-
1995, term
Yes.
limits went into effect in the city of Utica. It was voted on by the voters of the city of Utica in a referendum, and it was voted on about 84% to 16% that they wanted an 8-year term limit. This mayor, after having spent most of his second term up already,
Yep.
through groups of friends of his, who went out and tried to gather signatures to get it on the ballot. When they were up against the concern of not having enough signatures to get on the ballot, they simply circumvented the process and went to the council and utilized 5 friendly votes on a 9-member council to
Sure.
vote this through and create a 12-year term rather than
and
an
a good
8-year
30
term.
people stood up and spoke against it.
Yes.
And the council still, they had enough votes of,
And even the people who signed the petition saying, yeah, let's get it to 12 years, said, well, we thought this was just going to put it on the ballot. And that's what they were actually told. Some of the people I talked to, and it wasn't a huge number, but I've probably talked about a dozen people who said, yeah, they told us that this just gets it on the ballot. Don't worry, just sign it, it'll get it on the ballot, thinking that they could then go to the ballot
then
and vote
go
it
to
down.
referendum.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Term limits is huge. We talk about term limits on the show all the time and how important they are, how they keeps government accountable, keeps fresh people in office. But I want to go to one of the things you mentioned, which is something Larry and I talked about all the time last year, and that is the idea of cutting taxes or keeping them the same versus cutting spending.
Right.
And that's why I see all across the state, all the time is, government saying, yeah, we cut your taxes this year. And it's usually they haven't cut the spending.
Right.
We have a situation where we have somebody going around saying, yeah, they cut taxes, and the percentage they say they cut is like, 10 cents on 1,000 or something. So that's not really a tax cut. But then in addition to that, if you look at the budget that they have, it's actually $11 million more than the previous year. And so they've cut taxes, air quotes who are listening on the radio there. But what they've done is, well, everybody's property was reassessed. So the
Another
tax
trick.
rate
Right.
went down, but guess what? Spending went up. Your taxes were, sure, if you want to go based on the actual meaning of cutting taxes, sure, the rate was cut, but you're still paying more. You're
Right.
still paying more. You're still spending more. And that's something that I always press the listeners of this show to hold their elected officials accountable for how many dollars are being spent. The tax rate, a lot of times, it's a boogeyman. It's a circular thing, because if you cut the spending, guess what? The taxes can go down.
well, that's a lot like in the city of Utica right now. I hear the mayor boasting about the budget, but people don't always put together all the real estate sales that one time this building is being sold, and that's why it's in the budget.
And that was one-shots, yeah, the one-shots.
Yeah, so it's not a great reflection of
What was
what to
interesting to
expect.
me is I looked at the county tax bills, and they had up on the upper corner of the tax bill, if you looked back about 4 years ago, it would say 90.7% or some number like that of this budget is mandated by other governmental agencies, whether the state or the
Yeah.
federal
Yep.
government. But now, if you look at it now, it's like 88.6% is mandated. And that difference alone is an increase in spending on items that are not necessary
Right.
and not mandated by about $10 million. So the county has spent about an additional $10 million on things that they felt responsible. The money that comes in from the United Indian Nation, for example, gets to be distributed by the county executive as if he's the governor and coming through
Right.
with member items and things like that, or earmarks, as they used to call it in the federal system. And that's wrong. That's wrong. I mean, these monies, if they're going to come in, should either be used to reduce the tax levy across the board for everybody, or to maintain some sort of a fair system that everybody agrees upon needs to be taken care of. And but that's not happening right now.
Right.
There is no input. It's just the county executive gets to play basically Santa Claus and bounce throughout the area. And of course, in election year, Santa Claus shows up more than once a year. And when you
Oh, it's so true.
there's a lot of chimneys that are being greased out there. So it's you got to kind of worry about that.
So we're coming up pretty close to our half-an-hour break. Looks like we got maybe 30 seconds to a minute left here. How can people find out about your campaign, Tim?
Well, I'm going to start the door-to-door campaign. Of course, the election cycle this year changed a little bit, and people aren't really overly excited about any sort of election issues right now, and the federal things going on. I'm going to start the door-to-door campaign, doing a lot of direct mail. I'll be on the radio show circuit, so I will be out there and also getting on social media. I have a Facebook page up and running pretty soon as well. But
Very good. And just for people who might be checking this out, where's your district?
19th District, it's South Utica. 19th District of Oneida County is South Utica. Starts in the New Hartford line, goes right down to about Oneida Square, and from the whole Parkway area comes right across to the Yorkville and New York Mills area.
All right, very good.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, we'll be back here on Radio Free New York, and we'll be talking with County Executive candidate Michael Hennessy.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. AM 1040 Avon Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL. AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. Today's show's a little different. I am in Utica talking with local candidates running on the Libertarian Party, and I have with me Katie Martin,
Hey, guys.
who is running for Utica Common Council. This is also her coffee shop,
Yes.
Character
Thank you
Coffee.
for coming down.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And then the next guy we've got here with us is Michael Hennessy, who's running for county executive.
That's right, and first I want to thank you and your audience for this opportunity, and thank you for the Libertarian Party endorsement, and I'm looking forward to working with all the candidates in the area that you've endorsed.
Awesome, very cool. So, something we didn't do in the last segment there was talk about, what you guys feel the Libertarian Party maybe means to Utica.
Sure.
So I'll
Yeah.
let you go first.
I think it's about giving the voice back to the people. Small government Utica's the opposite of that right now. And it's very much a special interest group. And I go back to the reason, and the day I remember it was I made the decision to run, and I have no political background at all. We own a coffee shop, and we're actually from the area. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina for a couple years, and we missed it here, so we decided to move home. And I think we might have picked one of the hardest counties to do business in to move home and make this leap. And we're in a position where I want people to come back. I want people to have a reason to stay, and I don't think that's going to happen until the voices that are here are heard. And it goes back to the part of, I heard that my common council representative now in First Ward, I heard she was going to run for a third term unopposed. And it was just driving me nuts. And for about a couple of days, I was yelling at everybody, who's going to run, guys? And then it dawned on me, I'm like, crap, it's me.
Walking down the hall, you looked there, the mirror was, and then you knew.
And it was that moment, and it just kind of felt like a civic duty. And I can see a lot of things that led up to this point, and I'm so happy and thankful that I actually am. And I think it's going to be a good fit now. But Utica, I think, would benefit the most of a libertarian policy in place and give people that sense of peace and just hope that their voice does matter.
Yeah,
and try and bring that back countywide too. By all
We need
means.
1,000 Katie Martins
You're so sweet.
in this county to, I think if you look at my campaign, I feel very strongly it's a transition. That I'm not going to be a county executive for 13 years like the current county executive. My first term is to try to rebuild our infrastructure. Our sidewalks are torn apart. Our roads are in rough shape. We have to rebuild our infrastructure. And secondly, like Katie, she brings in a new type of politician, and I don't put that in the worst sense, in the best sense. Somebody with a lot of energy. Yeah, a lot of energy. And I think the Libertarian Party can allow us to go cross party lines and bring the best of both major parties' influence through the Libertarian Party. And I've seen that with the group that I'm working with here, that you've parties endorsed. I'm very proud of that endorsement.
Yeah, that's great. So actually, one of the questions I was wondering about, as you guys were talking about this, it sounds like county legislators, or at least the mayor had term limits, but maybe not common council or the county exec. There's no term limits there?
There's no term limits in the county government at all.
Okay.
I think the average age, to be quite honest with you, because I was a 3-term county legislator, which I termed myself out of,
Love
it's probably in the mid-60s right now.
that. Okay.
And we were one of the largest boards. There was 29 county legislators for a relatively small county. That has a large number of legislators. We reduced that in my final term to 23. It should have been about 17 like Broome County and Schenectady County are. But you sometimes have to compromise. So there are things I'd like to see done as a county executive. First of all, like I talked about, the infrastructure. Second of all, there's some key issues coming down the next 4 years. Right here, we could almost open the door and see where those issues are. Downtown hospital, brand new downtown hospital, probably $300 million of state tax dollars, another $100 million of county and city tax dollars. Our parking garage that was originally about $50 million is going to probably be about 60 to 70 million when that's all done. But the problem is, it's the county executive top down telling everybody what's going to happen. A new casino will occur down the road because he needs more revenues, as Tim Julian was just talking about. So I want to see government bottom up, with the people being involved in their government. We're going to encourage that. We're going to bring new young people into my administration, into the different departments with new ideas and cost-saving ideas, improve our technology in government that can save a lot of money.
Right now,
over
it's
time.
definitely the friends and family plan that they
Yes.
say. Absolutely everywhere. And I feel like it's a government that doesn't reflect the people that are here. Utica has a population of 30% refugees, and they've done enormous work to bring help our economy and bring things back. But just a diversity sense too. I think diversity and inclusion brings better and more diverse ideas for these solutions.
Without our Bosnians community and other communities, Vietnamese, et cetera, this county would probably be losing about 40, 50,000. We're about where we've been for the last 8 years, but that's because of
True.
people that have come here to, we're a refugee center. We're proud of what they've done to this community, and they've really improved the neighborhood. So we've got to build on that too. But I'd like to see over time to kind of rebuild the foundation, the fiscal foundation of Oneida County, turn it over to somebody that's younger, who's going to carry the ball further, and start bringing in private sector money. Because in the long run, it's going to be private sector money that really develops quality jobs.
Absolutely. It's sustainable. They're doing a lot of projects right now they want the hospital. It's like for a lot of people, it's this magic wand of this get-rich-quick scheme, and it's going to bring all this industry, which for me, it doesn't add up because I've tried to get the answers, and it looks like less jobs because it's less rooms and a lot of things. But there isn't a get-rich-quick scheme here. It's private business, one at a time, all working together that really sustains this. And I go back to a big thing that I'm doing with Utica is trying to bring a business directory. How we've made it this long without one shows how much they actually care about us as businesses.
Sure.
And and countywide too. I think that's the next step. And it's frustrating to see if they don't care. Like, how do they even know what we're feeling or what we're thinking? It's not like we get a vote as businesses, but you expect a lot of the demand to come from that, and there's a lot of
You mean to
disconnects.
tell me businesses have taxation without representation?
Imagine.
I think a war was
Nailed
fought over
it.
that once.
I think
Well,
so.
again, we're also seeing the government moving businesses out of their areas, paying them to leave. We lost about $500,000 between the city and county taxes with the project going on with the downtown hospital. I want that project slowed down. I want to get real answers to all the questions, fiscally especially.
That's the thing. There's still time. Even if
Yeah.
there was a hospital, there's still time to benefit from this. I feel like on other sides of it, that Utica is just giving over in Oneida County all of this
Right.
opportunity, and it's just not a fair match.
Right.
There's even, I think there's compromises still that haven't been made.
And we've got to rebuild the economic development offices in Oneida County. We have a couple different ways we're doing it, and I think EDGE is the countywide program that has failed miserably. SUNY Technology was supposed to be a tech park up there. Think of all the students that went up there thinking that they're going to be matched with not only the education, but hand-on experience that is not going to occur, because we never got these 3,000 jobs that we were promised originally. Went down to 2,000.
We paid for it, though.
Went down to 1,000.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and if anybody questions the county executive, or even the mayor for that matter, it's like you're a bad person. You're negatively looked at. Questioning is good. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, Doubt is not the opposite of faith, it is part of faith. And we can doubt things and make sure that it's the right moves that we're making before we spend the $300 million that we spent up at the SUNY Technology Park that there's only security guards walking the halls right now.
Yeah, and that brings up a great point of just the idea of government and how we interact with it. The idea that if you question government, people look at you like you're a bad person. That's not how it's meant to be.
No,
Government's supposed to be representative of the people, and I feel like, especially across New York State, we've lost this idea of public service. Everybody talks about politicians. I want some public servants in office, people
Absolutely.
who are working for me, not people who are trying to collect money from my wallet.
Right.
So, yeah, no, I agree. 100%.
Transparency is so important too in government, and the downtown hospital's a good example. People couldn't get answers to their questions.
And that's the biggest part of this too, for a
and
lot of people.
if they can't get answers, they doubt whether or not this is the right thing. And we've been burned this area. This area's been burned several times on fiscal projects by the government, spending a ton of our money and not working out. So I think we have the right to ask of our leaders the questions that need to be answered so that we do want to buy into the program.
Yeah. Rochester is got the same issues. I think these are issues all across New York State. We had photonics promised us. We had,
Oh, wow.
all sorts of things, millions and millions of taxpayer dollars. People say millions of government dollars, but it's actually millions of taxpayer dollars. Money from your wallet, money from yours, money from mine, money from his, and all this money coming out, going to a developer to build a space that then sits empty, going to some private corporation, and usually not, they don't just usually get the money, they usually get maybe they don't have to pay property taxes for 10 years.
Right.
And then in addition to that, maybe they don't have to pay employment tax for 10 years and all this stuff. And what I see happen constantly with this sort of thing is a big business comes in, they soak up all the money, all the taxpayer
Right.
dollars. In the process, they pull all the small businesses out of business. And then when the tax rebates run out, the government, incentives run out, all that taxpayer runs out, they go, all right, who's offering the next thing? Oh, Buffalo? Buffalo's going to do this? You know what? We're relocating our headquarters to Buffalo.
Yep.
And they leave a town. It's now a ghost town. There's no small businesses. It's struggling economy. There's no more jobs. And this is an issue created by government. This is an issue that doesn't come out of the free market. This is a government created issue. And of course, the thing I hear a lot of times is, well, the way to fix it is we need to spend more money. We need more of these programs, and they don't get it. They're still stuck in that cycle.
I always liked what you and Larry were campaigning on. I remember somebody asked, if you're our governor, will you lower taxes? And Larry's response was quick to say, let me just freeze where it's at. Let's work really hard to just not spend
Just
more.
stop spending
And it
more
was just
money.
such practical
Yeah.
steps I feel like the Libertarian Party has that I don't see on the right and left sides of how to change our society. And yeah, that's what I appreciate more about the party, I think.
Well, we have a small company, I'm not going to name the company, but in 30 years, it went from Vernon, New York to Stockbridge in Madison County, now back in my city where I live, in the city of Sherrill, New York. And it's gotten benefits for about a 10-year period, and then they move,
Right.
Yeah.
and then they move again.
Well, how about with the hospital? The reason I got involved in the conversation to begin with in Utica is eminent domain's at stake. And until you can officially, there's nobody who says that this is 100%. I mean, Utica will say it's a done deal for those who want it. And I don't think done deal should ever be in the vocabulary. That should be a sign for citizens, okay, there's an issue. And, but, I mean, we look at Little Pink House. When you look at Pfizer that came to Connecticut, and then they never built. They took the house, they bulldozed it. But it's just, it's not how a government should play its part. By all means.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the eminent domain issue, I feel, is like huge in Utica.
Yeah.
I almost feel like it's put Utica on the map for some people.
Yeah.
Because it's an issue that, a lot of people, when they think of eminent domain, they think of, something, I don't want to say good or positive.
Well, they
I
think
never
highways.
see,
Yeah, it's for the
they
better
think
good of the city.
roads, like that sort of thing.
And that's, Utica's in a spot where for me, sometimes I look at the whole hospital debate and I'm like, oh, you can use eminent domain for healthcare. You can't use it for a parking garage for the odd. So that's why this all looks like one big disguise. And that's something when asking elected officials, I'm condescending about if they condescend me on. And but the biggest issue with the eminent domain for me is I remember talking with somebody from the community foundation who's helping not MBHS, our hospital, to move forward. And they said, let me ask you, why are you so worried about eminent domain? That's happening all the way on the other side of town. And as a business owner, I was just so offended. I'm like, we need to stand together. If that's happening to them, it's me next. And they're like, no. And you can't, just how they try to spin it. But it's true. If we don't stand together on these issues, you're up next.
Yeah, and taking eminent domain, especially in the Utica example, the idea that you would take property from one private company and hand it over to another
Yes.
is just, it sets a terrible, extremely dangerous precedent, because who's to say someday down the road, and this might be an extreme example, but somebody says, we're going to take this McDonald's property and give it to Burger King. Because that's essentially what you're doing. You're taking somebody's private property and handing it over to another private entity.
Right.
And that's a dangerous precedent to set.
Yeah.
Not saying it's happening today, but it could if you go down that path.
And in this particular situation, it's not as though there wasn't land or space available for this hospital. Like there's so much conversation to be had, and I always go back to whatever happens at this point, but it's the communication from our officials. Like, what is the next hospital project? How can we get the best out of this for the people?
Yeah.
And keep those doors of communication open and welcomed. Absolutely.
We had another example of public domain up at the technology park 5 miles north of us.
Yeah.
And farmers were pushed out, and yes, they were paid, but they were pushed out. They didn't want to move. Wetland issues that you and I would have problems developing, they kind of got swept away too, because we had this county executive that I'm running against that acts like the governor of New York, where if he wants to do something, he's going to get it done one way or the other.
Well, a lot of times they're planning things without knowing the businesses that are there. I can't tell you how many times I said, how many businesses are going to be in this 25 acres of downtown? And nobody had answers. And that goes back to, we need a business directory. We need people who are actually, I'm sick of people making decisions who aren't in downtown or who aren't in Utica or who aren't in the county, and they are untouchable.
Sure, yeah. So last segment, we talked a little bit about what County Ledge does, Common Council does. Tell us a little bit, for those who might not know, who might be considering voting for the first time this year, and they're going to see county exec as a bubble that they can fill in on their ballot. What's the county exec do?
Well, the county executive oversees 1,500 employees. He's head of, he picks the department heads for the county, various department heads. But in my opinion, the strongest thing that a county executive can do is be the chief fiscal officer of that county, and they make the right financial decisions. In my opinion, we need to refurbish our infrastructure first and foremost, and our tax structures, and start to control spending better here in Oneida County. And then private sector money will follow. Being a financial person all my life, I've seen that happen in other communities. So we have to get a better foundation before we can expect real businesses coming into the county. We have these public announcements. We've brought companies in for a few years and they're gone. We had one company that was the savior of Oneida County by Governor Pataki's announcement, and the county executive. He was working at the time as the chief economic guy around the 5-county region here.
Sure.
And that was gone in a year. And if you really looked at the company, you knew it couldn't provide. It was building radiators, and how could you call that an old-style radiators and air conditioners? How could you believe that that was going to be a turnaround company? And they said, oh, it's an international company. I called the company, and I got a phone call. I called the company in Sweden. There was 4 employees that were laughing when I told them that they were an international company. They're not doing their homework.
Sure.
And the people that are overseeing it are going to be gone under my administration day, where we're going to bring new people in to help revitalize this community.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep
No, I
going.
look at this election and I can't emphasize enough how crucial it is. Yeah, Utica is in such a fragile place. it still can do amazing things. It's so, I always say it's underdeveloped enough to open a coffee shop on the main street at 28 years old. Like that, these are cool reasons of why we moved back, but it's in such a fragile spot that under the wrong leadership, I want to be here another 50 years, but can we? Like, we can't afford this. So this is so important that people get out and vote and know who they're voting for on November 5th.
25 years ago, I moved back from New York City.
Really?
Thinking I could help to turn this community around. And I hope Katie Martin's around for 25 years because this community will finally turn around. But we need 100, like I said, 1,000 Katie Martins. And I really encourage young people to get involved in government and to put their energy behind this community.
Yeah, and I agree too. I mean, one of the reasons I got involved, I have many, many reasons why I got involved, but one of them is because I did feel as if my elected officials didn't represent me.
Right.
You know, I looked around and I saw people who were maybe way older than me, lived in different places, went through different life experiences, and I wanted to have a voice, and I felt like my generation didn't have a voice, you know, and I agree. So the fact that you want to bring young people in, I think, is great and amazing because I think a lot of young people do feel disenfranchised in general from politics. And I think that that's something that could be exciting. And I think if there's any young people listening, which I'm sure there are, I see you guys on Facebook already, so I know you're listening. Please get involved, whatever your local campaign is.
If you have questions of figuring out how, message me. I know everybody would say the same. And there's so much that we figured out just kind of day by day with this. And I'm shocked to be at this far along and thankful for people like you who I can ask questions to.
Yeah.
And it takes a group.
New York makes it really hard to run for office.
Yeah.
They really,
You're talking
really
to somebody
make
who's
it
had
hard.
13 judges have to rule if I could be on the ballot or not.
Yeah, I mean,
You're talking to somebody who spent $13,000 on attorneys to stand in
Yeah,
Democrat.
they've tried kicking us off the ballots many times so far, and
'Cause
just to give people the choice.
We don't play with the cabal, I'll call it.
Yep.
We question things, and
You're
they
right.
don't want people questioning things. They've got their own personal agendas. Many of them are making money off these projects that we've talked about throughout your show, and their friends. So we're enemies to them, but we will move this community forward eventually. We'll finally win the argument someday, and hopefully it'll be very shortly.
And that's where I always am on the fence of term limits, as like the libertarian in me of, no, people should have the right to vote no matter what happens. But also, it's so important, I think, and as Mike says, like in passing on the torch and keeping the next generations involved, I do see that as a necessity, or at least with how our counties ran so far.
yeah, no, absolutely. So bringing term limits back.
Yeah.
Is that something either of you plan on pushing for, trying to get passed? What are your thoughts on that?
I as I said earlier, I term myself every time I run for an office. But
So you're already leading by example.
right.
Yep.
And I hope that we bring a whole new group of people in the county. Mr. Julian, Tim, that was here earlier on your show, he's an example of somebody that we need on the county board who's an independent thinker. The party bosses are not going to tell him how to vote on
Right.
issues. We need that. You know, on the county level, if I wasn't running, there wouldn't be one candidate or one campaign.
Which
'cause
blows
they're
my
all
mind.
not in, They're all endorsed by
Right.
basically both parties.
Yeah.
And they don't have opponents.
Yeah.
So.
And that's even personally for me. I would like I come into this. Who knows what the next 2 years would look like if I win the office? But I would love to see the next 2 years spent on empowering people. So there's 10 people fighting over the line who are
Yeah,
better and more involved in
absolutely.
this community than
Yeah.
I even am. And like that's my goal. And
If
hopefully
we had that,
would-
we wouldn't need term limits.
Right. Honestly, when
You
that's
know,
done
it's
right,
true.
put forward,
But-
you don't need
but
that
because it
regulation.
isn't that way, I'm in favor of term limits.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's almost like talking about free market for, political office. The idea that you'd have multiple people competing for that ballot spot and the
Right.
idea that people could then choose the best option.
Well, then I see the other side too, where if you're in office and you started your life at 18, now you have pensions and a lot of things at stake. How could you? Where do you go if you're out of office? And it's this confusing system that keeps them in place and doesn't actually give the people what they need.
Yeah.
As I think we
Yep.
see with Vicente, even Palmieri right now.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that constantly. We've talked about how elected officials, once they get in office, they get all these benefits. Sometimes they get a chance to vote on their raises.
Right.
They get to vote on increasing their
mean-
benefits. It's like the three of us in a room, and we're your elected officials, and we go, hey, we're working kind of hard.
Right.
What do you think? We deserve a raise? And you say,
Well, that's what I look
"Yeah,
at with
I think so."
our current county exec, Anthony Pacenti. He gave himself a raise up to $140,000 is now what he makes, and that's way up on the high end of what county execs make. And for
Yeah.
Oneida County, I saw your website here, Mike. That's almost up and running, and I saw what you put for what you would do for salary. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I would not take 140,000. I made my money in the private sector. He didn't, and I that's fine. But I have a different thought process in regards to taking money from the private sector and the public sector as far as being an elected official that I would not. I'd take probably 20% less.
All right, and the music is playing, guys. We're at the end of the show. Thank you so much for joining us here
Yes.
on Radio
Well,
Free
thank
New
you for
York.
your endorsement.